And thank you for joining us this evening for Oil and Water, two artists, two approaches, an evening with Joe Kasmirchik and Beatrice Bork. I'm going to just ask that you all keep your microphones muted and your videos also, well, not muted, but off. So we're really excited this evening because our two artists are combined into the type of person that our latest exhibition, Gerard Rutgers Hardenberg, is in just one person. We've got two that's like him. So they are both New Jersey artists, Beatrice Bork and Joe Kasmirchik. Both draw their inspiration from their outdoor experiences and are going to share their artwork and inspirations this evening with us. And Beatrice's watercolor paintings display sensitivity to detail and composition, and she does animal subjects, while Joe, an oil painter, expresses the beauty of our regional landscapes inspired by his time in nature. So Beatrice is a resident of Hunterdon County and focuses on birds, as I mentioned. She has received many accolades, including numerous solo and juried exhibitions at regional galleries, various institutions, and museums throughout the U.S. and abroad. For over 25 years as a professional artist, among her achievements include signature status in the prestigious international group, the Society of Animal Artists, where her work has been selected for several art and the animal exhibits, and was thrilled to be one of the recipients of the Don Eckelberry Award for Outstanding Bird Art. She has had her work displayed in a variety of publications and is proud to have had her work acquired by collectors from around the world. And we're going to see some of those in her portion tonight. A lifelong resident of New Jersey, Joe Kasmirchik, Joe Kaz, known as Joe Kaz, lives on the Sourland Mountain near Neshannock Station and finds much of his inspiration in the area immediately surrounding his home. Having always been drawn to the beauty of nature, Joe finds most of his subject matter on the hiking and bicycling trips that he loves to take, whether near his home or further afield. His painting is a natural extension of his ramblings and explorations of the countryside, and he has earned his accolades as a self-taught artist and has been exhibiting his work extensively for over 10 years. He's a recipient of many awards from the area's most prestigious juried exhibitions, including the art exhibit of Phillips Mill and Ellerslie Trenton City Museum, as well as featured solo exhibits and articles in regional publications. So welcome to Joe and Beatrice, and welcome to all of you. And again, I hope following this program, you're going to be so inspired to be out in nature and also stop into Morven to see the exhibition. So without further ado, I bring you Joe Kasmirchik and Beatrice Bork. Joe?
Okay, let me share my screen and give me a second. Wait, sorry. Does this look okay?
This looks great.
Okay, Bea, did you want to start?
Yeah, thank you, Debbie, the Morven Museum, and everybody who is attending. Joe and I were pleased to be asked to give this presentation with the backdrop of the wonderful current Hardenberg exhibit. You'll see that Joe and I also love the outdoors, and it inspires us through different forms of expression and medium. In this presentation, we'll focus on New Jersey landscape and wildlife, particularly birds for me. So we'll be taking turns speaking more about our work, and we'll save questions to the end if you don't mind. And now I'd like to turn things over to my friend and colleague, Joe Kasmirchik, to start us off with his wonderful landscape oil paintings.
Okay, thanks everyone for coming. I'm Joe Kasmirchik. As Debbie said in the introduction, I'm a landscape painter. It's really the main thing that's interested me as an artist. I've been painting on and off probably since my college days, but taking it pretty seriously since about 2005 when I started showing my work in galleries in the area. So as Debbie also mentioned, I bicycle a lot around the area. I've recently rekindled an interest in hiking. So that's really where all of my inspiration is coming from. I get my landscapes from my bicycle trips, just driving around the area, and lately hiking. So I tend to paint very close to home a lot. And what we're looking at right now is just a wall from a show I had at Artist Gallery a couple of years ago. You'll be able to see some of these paintings a little bit better further along. I want to show this. This is something I created for an exhibit I had once, where I thought it'd be fun to show the location of where all the paintings were in this particular show that I had. So the funny thing for me was I knew that I painted close to home, but I didn't realize just how close until I created this map. It really sort of surprised me. Princeton and Morven are just off in the lower right corner. Can't really see it on this map. The green area in the middle is the Sourland Mountain. It's a pretty well preserved area of land. I believe it's the biggest contiguous block of forest in central New Jersey. And this little star here is my home. The dots are where the paintings were. And it really surprised me that most of the paintings in this one show were within 4 or 5 miles of my house. So I really do paint close to home sometimes. And this one is literally across the street from my house. It's a piece of preserved farmland. I've done several paintings right here. Very convenient. And this is the same field looking north over Amwell Valley. And I sort of think this as the view from my mailbox. My house doesn't have a view at all, but the mailbox has a pretty good one, I think. So, and for bicycling, most of my bike rides start by taking me down this road. This is Amwell Road. It spans Hillsborough Township and East and West Amwell Township, Hunterdon County and Somerset County. And funny thing, when I've shown this painting, some artists have asked me, like, why do I put all the telephone wires in and the yellow lines? Like, why not make it a prettier country road? And for me, I think it's important just to leave that there. For one thing, I like it as a design element. And I think it's important just to show the period of time that the painting was done in. I mean, it's not the 1800s, it's the 21st century. So this is what we see. And I find it actually pretty attractive. A little bit further down Amwell Road, it's this farm. It's one of I think the only remaining working dairy farm in the area. And it's an interesting group of buildings, sort of presents itself as a nice scene without me needing to do anything to it. Sometimes things work out that way. Sometimes you need to rearrange things. But I painted this barn this farm quite a few times. And this next one is also the same farm. This is an older painting. It's done with acrylics, not oils. And in this one, I remember I had to rearrange quite a bit to make a decent composition out of it. The cow, I believe, was off on the right somewheres. I had to move a couple of the farm buildings around, but that's one luxury you have when working in the studio as opposed to working on location. You can really take time, play with composition, and you're not really rushed at all. This one, on the other hand, this is at the Watershed Institute just outside of Pennington. And this is one that I did on location, where a lot different than painting in the studio. You're really pressed for time because the main thing is the light changes so quickly. I mean, as people know that, but as an artist, you're surprised just how fast the light changes. On trees, for example, maybe it doesn't make a big difference, but on architecture, shadows moving across buildings, I can literally watch the shadows move as I stand there and paint. So one thing I'll talk about later is painting from imagination and memory too, where the odd thing is that even when you're painting on location and you have the subject in front of you, sometimes you're still painting from imagination and memory, because if I started painting when the light was just like it is here, a couple hours later, I would be trying to remember where the light was. Or sometimes what I can do is I can sort of anticipate where the sun will be moving and start painting the light and shadows where I think they will be later. So that's where the imagination comes in, and hopefully reality catches up with what I was thinking would happen. This one was also done on location. It's at Greenway Meadows, just a little bit north of Princeton, just on the outskirts of Princeton, actually. It's where the headquarters for the DNR Greenway Land Trust is. And that land trust, it's a group that preserves a lot of the parks that I like painting in. So I'm very grateful for the work that they do. And one thing, I hope it's obvious in this one, that when you're painting on location too, you're really pressed for time. And when things work right, I think it leads to a really nice spontaneity in the painting. And I think I've captured that in this one. Something I try to do in my studio pieces. I don't think I quite do it as well as on the pieces that I do on site. Also, another Princeton scene. This is at Princeton Battlefield. And this is one where I don't think I really had to change a thing. It was a beautiful winter scene where I love the vertical of the trees contrasting with all of the lines on the ground plane. And I do like painting snow scenes. Sometimes we don't really get a lot of snow in this part of New Jersey, so I try to get a lot of photographs when we do. And this one is, I think, a good example of why I like painting the things that are really familiar to me, which, like I said, tend to be the things close to home. This is just a few miles from my house. I ride my bike by here often. I was not riding my bike when there was a foot of snow on the ground like it is here, but I was home right after it snowed one day. And the sky was starting to clear. I just knew that this farm was going to look great in the late afternoon. So I just headed over there and took a bunch of photographs to work on this in my studio. So just another advantage of painting the things that you're really, really familiar with. And another one of the roads that I bicycle down quite a bit, Wirtsville Road. If you've never painted with oils or acrylics, at least myself, I find painting fine lines really hard, even broad lines. The paint just doesn't flow easily. It's not like pen and ink. So this was really an exercise in frustration painting this one, but I hope it came out well. And one thing I'd like to say too is that I don't really see a lot of other artists painting roads like this. I mean, some of my artist friends tease me that I do it so much, another road painting from Joe. But to me, it's really one of the most natural things for me to do, because it's how we all see so much of the world this way. If you're not a bicyclist, you see this from your car window. As you drive along your front windshield, I mean, think of it as a picture frame. You have a moving art show in front of you. And so that's why I tend to include a lot of roads like this. This one is a bit of a departure from my usual work. This was an old barn at St. Michael's Preserve in Hopewell. The barn's since been torn down and a new one built in its place. But I remember this one. I was the barn was full of barn swallows. Beatrice probably would have been painting the swallows. I guess I was painting a landscape out the window in the barn wall there. So, like I said, this one, it's really a departure. Usually I focus on certain themes, like my road paintings, rivers. I paint rivers a lot. Then I think for about a whole year, I painted almost nothing but skies. I think I went an entire year doing that. This was just driving home one night. Fortunately, I was able to pull over and take some photos here. The Joni Mitchell song, Night Ride Home, came to mind and gave me a title for this one. And this one, I remember clearly driving home from Lambertville one evening and watching the sunset start. And it reminded me that's one great thing about bicycling, that when I'm out during the day on my bike, I could stop just about anywhere and take photos. when you're in a car on a country road, it's not so easy sometimes. Sometimes you have to go for miles before you could find a place to safely pull over. So I was really desperately looking for a place to pull over and watch the sunset. So I was glad I finally did. And you, hopefully everyone's done this. I mean, if you sit and watch the sunset from start to end, it changes so much minute by minute. It's just such a spectacular thing to watch. Oops. This was one I did this as sort of an exercise in just loosening up. And it turned into a whole series of paintings. This was really totally from imagination. Still the same year I was painting nothing but skies. And it started out, like I said, it's just a way to loosen up, but it turned into a whole series of, I think, 25 or 30 skies from imagination. And I found that a really useful exercise to do, that once I started doing this, I really started paying attention more when I was outside. If I saw a sky or something that really caught my attention, I tried to stop and consciously focus on what it was that made me stop and look, like a certain combination of colors. Was it a contrast of warm and cool, interesting shapes in the sky? And then when I got back to doing the painting, I think that helped me just get the essence of the scene without too much detail. And that I find is a little danger when I'm painting on location or from photographs, that sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in the detail. Like if I was painting this on location, I might have had some telephone poles in here, or a road or some tree branches. But focusing just on the essentials, I think, was a really good exercise here. Another one, totally imagined sky scene. And after I did this one, I had this sort of sensation that I was somewhere up above the surface of the earth looking at this. I don't know why, don't know how I got there, but it gave me what I thought was a good title for the piece, so I called it Ascending. And a bad title, Imagine Sky Number 15. Like I said, this turned into a series of 25 or 30 imaginary skies, and I really ran out of titles, so sorry about that. One interesting thing with this one, I remember doing it entirely from imagination, but now that I look at it, to me, it's a very specific spot. So I'm sure some memories crept into this painting too. It's probably hard to separate memories and imagination anyway. And not imagined, this was a real scene in Lambertville, and I just love the contrast of the sunset with the architecture. Most of the time I paint out in the countryside. Once in a while, I'll do some paintings in town. And I guess this captures my two favorite elements, at least in this time period where I was painting sunsets and roads. So a little bit of imaginative editing here. The sun was actually setting way off to the left. I don't think it even would have been in this scene, but I moved it over to create this piece. And then somewhere along the way, I got back into hiking. So this next series of paintings are all from my hiking trips. And it's really been a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun doing this. I'm finding parks and places in New Jersey that I never knew about within an easy hour's drive of my house. This is a spot I've always known was there. It's Ken Lockwood Gorge on the south branch of the Raritan up by High Bridge, New Jersey. I always knew it was there, but I never went there until a couple of years ago. I think because as a hiking trail, I thought it would be too easy. There's the Columbia Trail follows this. It's one of those rails to trail things where a trail is built over an old rail bed. So it's really perfectly flat, but you can take a little side trip off of the Columbia Trail and go down into Ken Lockwood Gorge. And it's probably one of the most prettiest spots in the state, maybe anywhere that I've ever been, to be honest. And this is up at the Delaware Water Gap on Dunfield Creek, a creek that I've painted on quite a few times. So water is something that really captures my attention, really fascinates me in trying to paint it. It's such a tricky subject because it's both transparent and reflective at the same time. You're sort of seeing a bit of the bottom of the river, plus the reflections on top, plus the ripples that break up the surface. It's, I think, going to be an endlessly fascinating thing for me to paint. And this is one back on the Sourland Mountain, probably just about 7 miles or so from my house. I only found this place a couple years ago, so that's something I try to do all the time, hiking or just driving around, just finding someplace new to go. I just love exploring new places. And like I said, this is so close to my house, and I'm always finding new places so close to home. So I think the moral of the story here is just, get out and explore, look for someplace new. You'll probably be surprised what you find right under your nose. I always am. This is also on the Sourland Mountain. This is at the Sourland Ecosystem Preserve. I've painted this little bend in the creek quite a few times, but this one I titled it Autumn Memories because it's really more from imagination and memory than from reality. I based it on a few different photographs, plus what I just remember the place looking like at certain times. It's a spot where a lot of times during the day, it doesn't really look that special, but when you're there at the right moment, like the right time of day, the right time of year, there's just something magical about this one spot. And just a little bit further down the creek in this painting, you would come to this spot, the same creek. This is an older painting, so my style is a little bit different here. And this is one that I did on location again, so it's more of a literal interpretation of what's there as opposed to more of, not from memory and imagination like the previous one was. And my fascination with water, of course, leads me to waterfalls, and I'm always on the lookout for more. New Jersey doesn't really have a lot of big waterfalls, but some of the small ones are pretty nice. Laurel Falls is along Mine Road up at the Delaware Water Gap. The other falls, it's near Boonton, New Jersey, close to Pyramid Mountain, which is a little better known than Turkey Mountain. And that's one of those little falls that probably dries up in the summer, but it looked nice when I was there. And this one is at Morven Green State Forest in North Jersey. It's something I did from a few different photographs. It's a spot I've hiked to a lot, Wanakee High Point overlooking the Wanakee Reservoir. And it's a spot that's really hard to capture in a single photograph for some reason. So I did this painting combining a bunch of different ideas. And when I look at this painting now, to me, this really is the place. And I've been back there a few times since I've done this painting. And the funny thing is I can't find a place that really looks like this, but the painting to me feels more like the place than any of my photographs do, if that makes any sense at all. And at Alamuchi State Park, this one pretty much presented itself as a nice scene. There wasn't too much modification I did in here. And this was one where I was painting a lot of scenes from my hikes. And when I looked at the group of recent paintings, they all looked like studies in browns and grays to me. So in reality, I believe the water here, this is Butler Reservoir in North Jersey. The water was reflecting a pretty gray sky, but I just really boosted up the blues in this one to make a more interesting scene. Because in the end, it's about coming up with a good painting, not just literally copying what's in front of you. And back at the Water Gap, trail along Dunfield Creek again. And I don't paint many asphalt roads these days, but I still include dirt roads and dirt trails. So I guess it's a good design element for my work. And like I mentioned before, I love painting snow scenes. Living in central Jersey, sometimes we'll easily go the whole winter without any snow. And this day I remember there was no snow at all by my house down here. I knew there was snow in North Jersey, so I headed up to Ramapo County Reservation. It's a park pretty close to the New York state line. And when I got up there, and it was a great hike, there was a lot more snow than I was really expecting. And hiking in snow can be really, really tiring. So this spot was on the return leg of my hike. And I think the title is what was going on in my mind at the time, that I still had miles to go to get back to my car. And closer to home, again, back on the Sourland, I can walk to the spot from my house, which is really nice. This leads me into the Sourland Mountain Preserve, where I do a lot of hiking, and I've done quite a few paintings. This painting is further down into the Sourland Mountain Preserve, where more imagination in here. I pretty much invented the light coming in here. It's, you know, something we've all seen happen with sunlight on a misty day. And I thought this painting needed something. And oops, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay. So up to now, most of my paintings were, you see, I generally like the bigger view of things, looking, the scenic overlooks, the looking out over rivers or lakes, but I've done a few where I zoom in on a little more intimate detail of nature. So this was a brown-eyed Susan, I believe. Somewheres I passed on my wanderings, and I really just like the beat up look of the flower. I mean, it's just, to me, it was just so much more interesting than a perfect little flower. And this is one little cone flower growing right next to my house. Again, slightly ruffled up, like it's been in a little fight. And beech tree roots. I've become really fascinated by beech trees on my hikes. The roots, to me, they can look almost like arms or legs of some kind of animal or person. And this tree, I thought, just had so much personality. This painting, by the way, was acquired by the Trenton City Museum at Ellerslie, so it's now part of their permanent collection, and I was very happy about that. And one more beech tree back at Alamuchi Mountain, and I'll apologize for the title on this one. I believe it's pronounced Yggdrasil. The story behind that is, in Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is a giant mythical tree at the center of the cosmos holding up the world. And it's a kind of a long story about how I came to name this painting that, but this tree I thought was just so impressive standing in front of it that that name really came to mind. And one thing I'd like to mention with my tree paintings, like this one and this one, that I found it, one of the hardest things about painting a tree like this is the background, that because this tree is literally a tree in a forest of trees, and the trick of simplifying the background to convey a sense of the forest without totally competing the main subject, to me, I found quite challenging. And anyway, I think that's about all I really have to say. Thanks everyone for listening. I'll now turn it over to Beatrice, and we'll both take questions at the end.
Can I interject a minute? Can I ask a question?
Sure. Debbie, you're muted. Debbie, I see you're talking, but you're muted.
We're holding all questions until the end. And if you want to type something into the chat now, we'll include it. We have quite a few questions already popping into the chat from people who are emailing me. So you can just type right into the chat, and we can go on to the second half with featuring Beatrice. And Beatrice, are you unmuted? No.
Yes, I'm good to go, I think.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Debbie. So I grew up in New Jersey and still reside in Hunterdon County. And I don't really have to go far to find inspiration. In particular, birds are the easiest form of wildlife to see almost anywhere in the world, which may be why I'm so intrigued by them. I think New Jersey has about 480 species of birds that can be seen. Some are migratory, so they're not always around, but it's a pretty impressive number. So anytime I'm out, I'm bound to find something inspiring. To me, there's really nothing more satisfying than a chance to observe any animal, knowing that they're most likely aware of me, but they're still doing what they do. So I find it a privilege, and this encounter really fueled my creativity. All the paintings I'll be presenting tonight are watercolor and gouache. I'm often asked what gouache is, and simply put, it's opaque watercolor. So I refer to my paintings as watercolor because it encompasses both the mediums. So I like watercolor because it kind of echoes my personality. It allows me to be free with washes of color, as well explore my subjects in detailed rendering. So that lets me set a mood, as well as lets me focus in on my subject matter. It lets them pop more. So there are a couple of criteria that I like to meet when I'm working on a project. Two of the main ones are, what does it mean? And this part can be very personal, and I leave clues in the title. If the viewer has a totally different reaction to a painting than I intended, that's totally okay. We all have life experiences that affect how we see the world. So any reaction is a good one. And the second is it accurate? So I'm beginning here with Winter Curiosity. I wanted to capture the natural character of the birds and their demeanor, and emphasize that feeling of curiosity that the chickadees seem to have naturally. I created the branch to add a compositional element to add texture and some visual movement. Next. So the following few paintings are examples of what I'll call backyard inspirations. The majority of the paintings tonight are birds, as in homage to Mr. Hardenberg, but I do exploring our other local wildlife. So I have a few sprinkled in. Charming is a large painting of a green frog. I enjoyed working the watercolor layers to build up the texture on the frog's skin. I'll note here that I don't use frisket or blocking mediums to keep areas of the paper white. I feel it disrupts the feel of the paper surface. And I use a hot press watercolor paper for detail. This surface, you lose a little bit of color because the pockets of paper don't hold the watercolor. It's flatter, but it enables me to get a more detailed painting. And one of the things I like exploring is pattern and texture, as evident in this great box turtle. I found this little guy, and it just screams, paint me. They're amazing creatures, and it reminds me of childhood adventures where we used to go out into the fields and find one when we wanted to. Sad to say, that's not as easy to do anymore. Next, please. So I like finding new ways to paint some typical and popular subjects. I observed this low-flying cardinal on a snowy day, and it reminded me of the red flyer slides we used to have as kids, thus the name. Next. This is a typical winter scene in Hunterdon County. Here I wanted to explore the juxtaposition of the color, bent and angled corn stalks, and the textures against the color and the crown of this female. It's sort of a soft feel contrasting with the cold winter feel. Next. Focusing here again on a less brightly colored bird in fall flurries. This was inspired by an early snowfall of the season. I like working more in the neutral tones of this to reinforce the quietness of the changings of the season. So next. So in contrast, a less vibrant bird does not necessarily mean a quiet painting. Here in Sing, I used the bright colors in the background to emphasize the neutral colors of the sparrow. The leaves and the vine textures in the background lend themselves to a noise or the song of the bird's voice. Next. This is a very small bird, excuse me, but it's pretty readily seen if you look for it. I spent quite a bit of time observing this one, and she had what felt was a prickly teenage attitude of what do you want, which also seemed to be right in the pine tree, the needles of the pine tree setting. Little Princess was an easy title to title this one. Next, please. I chose the contrast of purples and yellows, but kept the washes soft with the feel of the mourning dove on this one, soaking up some early morning sun. Here, I'm using some artistic license because the street that it was sitting on at the time didn't add anything to the painting, so I left it off, basically. Next. So I'll fly away, use the different approach than my usual process. Here, there are times where I paint a lot of backgrounds just to clear a painter's block or explore some colors or just play with something new. So what I do with these backgrounds is just leave them around in the studio, and then hopefully one day some inspirational strike and I'll know what to paint. Eventually the washes on this one struck me as a spring woodland, and I envisioned a chickadee in flight, and the title coincided a little bit to the way I was feeling at the time. Next, please. So I've been growing more and more intrigued by trees over the last few years as I spend time waiting for my dog's ritual sniffing and marking. It's a good cover for staring at a tree. The dog makes for a good cover for staring at the tree, which works out to my advantage as well. So Flicker of Spring reflects the hopeful moments of spring. I liked working with the textures and patterns here. The bird, trunk, lichen, flowers, all this activity added to the feeling of a spring awakening. Next. So I find that keeping aware of my surroundings opens up sights that I may miss if I'm not carefully looking. Here I found a group of ringneck ducks on my nearby pond, which is usually always just covered with Canada geese. So when I saw them, I went home, grabbed a camera. A few months later, I created this piece. I chose the color scheme to enhance the ducks and liven up the normally drab brown pond that they're in. Next. Surveyor, also a backyard bird. This young Sharpie was trying to take my bird feeding to the next level. It missed and perched on my deck for a long time, allowing me to get a lot of sketches and a lot of photographs while he was sitting there looking around, wondering where his dinner went. The idea of doing this almost like a film reel seemed very appropriate because it emphasized the bewilderment he seemed to be experiencing. Next. The robin is a quintessential New Jersey bird. And during our COVID lockdown last spring, I discovered this one on the nest, and it felt very much like our current stay-at-home situation. Next. The lockdown also coincided with the return of the Redwing blackbirds, which are abundant near me. Their arrival and their song is an early sign that spring is coming, and is always a welcome, hopeful feeling for me. Next. I created Seriously based on the look that one of the birds was frequently giving me as I observed him day in and day out. I got this "you again" look, and it became a painting. Another piece hanging in was a female Redwing Blackbird, and this felt appropriate again, the symbolic pose for the time last year. Next. So I'll turn now to another favorite area. As Hardenberg, I really love our Jersey coastal areas. As a child, it was summer vacations in Wildwood Crest. In the day, watching the sanderlings keep time with the waves. And in the evenings, we would walk on the beach with my dad and feed the seagulls clams that we found. Next. When I hear seagulls, it takes me right back to those wonderful times. Very reminiscent for me. Next. So nowadays, I spend more time in other areas of the coast, more like the Forsyth Wildlife Refuge, in Brigantine, all the way down to Cape May Point as one of my favorite general areas at this time. Turn, Turn, Turn is a piece from Forsyth. It was a sighting of a ruddy turnstone, and this inspired a more emotional painting for me, which was reflected in the color I chose for the background and in the title. Next, please. The great blue herons are frequently seen at Forsyth, but all over the state, frankly. In Steadfast, I wanted to convey a steadiness, and I used the bird's color in the background wash to emphasize this. The horizontal watercolor wash echoes the calm ocean breeze. Next. In contrast, Rouser of the same bird conveys a sense of alarm and excitement. You can see that I've used the background direction and the texture and color change to add a different mood for this piece. Next. So in another example of how I use the direction of the wash, Marshmallow has a more literal background, and turning the washes into the grasses and reflections gave this a quiet feel. Next. So process. A lot of people ask me if I just photograph my work and just paint it, and that's just not how it seems to work for me. My key word is observation, and I think Joe also keyed on that. The more you see something, the more you learn, the more you know your subject. So this information is stored somewhere in my brain until it's ready till it percolates, it's ready, it's cooked, it's ready to paint. So I don't really question, where or when or how this happens. It's sort of a gift that bubbles to the surface, and it just seems right. Sometimes a thing is in my head for years before I decide to actually have an idea that's worth painting. So this is why I take a lot of photographs too, though. The photographs help me in the researching of detail, movement, and also helps me recall memories of observations at the time that I initially started to research the piece. So here you see a Post-it note with a barn swallow that I saw chasing a bug, and I thought, yeah, this is great. I'm going to do this. So I just start with a scribble, then I end up drawing it and finishing it up and redrawing it until it becomes a painting. Next, please. This scribble turned into Catch Me If You Can. So many rounds of drawings, research, tweaking of composition until I'm happy with the drawing. And then that's when I start the painting process. And that just takes as long as it takes until I decide it's finished, which sometimes feels like never. Next. Here's another sample of process. Here's a sketch of a rabbit to the finished painting, or almost finished. It's not signed here. This rabbit seemed like an old timer to me, like a backyard bunny who has experience, knows the ground, knows where the grass is good, knows which dogs he can ignore. And the title for this turned into The Groundskeeper. Next. So in the next few paintings, I'll just show some pieces that are inspired from different places in New Jersey. New Jersey has some great gardens, parks, wildlife management areas, and preserves. A lot of places to explore. This American goldfinch is, of course, our New Jersey state bird. And this was inspired in a field of sunflowers. Next. So I'll have a couple of inspirations here from Buck Gardens and Far Hills. That's the Somerset County Park System. It has a beautiful pond and water area. And this piece just was a frog soaking in a pond, and he just seemed like a happy camper on a hot summer day. Next. Buck Gardens again. Totally different feel here. The dragonfly really had the feel of an extraterrestrial, and it was perched on this plant, which I don't know, or actually don't remember what it is, but it just felt like an out of this world kind of situation, and was inspiration to paint it. Next, please. So our summer visiting ruby-throated hummingbirds are among my favorites. They're always a thrill to see them in a cultivated garden. They kind of take a garden to the next level, my personal feeling. So hummingbirds are a never source of inspiration for me. Next. Here's another hummingbird in the painting Garden Disciple on a cardinal flower. And then next to it, they're just masters of flight. And I decided to display this in the Party Crasher as they check out a honeybee passing through. I do like a little humor in my work, and it comes through on the titles mostly. Next, please. Here are a couple of paintings of warblers, which are migratory species that can be seen in a lot of different places, from woodlands to fields. The variety they have lend them to all sorts of different scenarios and paintings. The color, they're great. I love them. Next. Wood Thrush on the Rocks and Headbanger are two pieces that are inspired by our wooded areas, such as the nearby Sarahlands. Next. Another great resource can be found in our wildlife rehabilitation centers, like the Raptor Trust. Although I do very much prefer an encounter in the wild, it gives you a more natural and relaxed character observation. These places do help in research sometimes, though. So the inspiration for Inquisitive, the barn owl, was from one of the backgrounds I had painted. It was in my studio, and after some time, the yellow ochres in that color, that Payne's gray purpley color, sort of took on a feel like it was light, excuse me, light being filtered through a barn. And barn owl just seemed like the natural bird to put in this piece. So while Century, the piece next to it, was inspired by a sighting in Round Valley, and the background was created specifically for him. Next. So I'm also intrigued by the spaces where nature and man intersect, particularly with swallows and their ease in man-made places. Down Under features cliff swallows under the New Hope Lambertville Bridge from the New Jersey side. I created the painting based on a concept I thought of before I even began doing the research for it. I had sketched the idea first, then I went to the bridge, hoping that any bird would show up so I could get a bridge versus bird size ratio. A grackle eventually helped me out. I then composed the painting. The birds were placed and arranged entirely by my imagination. And this again is where observation really helps. Next. The Arrivals explores a similar process. I found a barn and created the scene. Next. Tide Watch was this great abandoned dock. I love the textures, and the ruddy turnstones were just a natural fit for these, especially in use of that rusting bolt. It added to the composition and feel. Next. So in the vein of man-made, here's another piece that the title actually came before the painting. Male goldfinches are like the quintessential boys of summer in my mind. And I created this painting complete with a bumblebee. You can pretty much get what I mean with birds and bees here and boys of summer. Next. This piece is Pinnacle, which I'm proud to say was just accepted into the Society of Animal Artists Art That Matters to the Planet exhibit, which will be beginning at the Roger Tory Peterson Institute in New York this August, and then go on tour. So this painting is a sort of a half full, half empty feel to it. It's reflecting the idea of habitat loss, as well as my personal, somewhat optimistic representation of the end of one thing and the beginning jumping point to another. So next, we'll end here with two paintings that Joe and I did at the very same place. Obviously, we have different points of inspiration here. We very much are inspired differently, but we are very much similar in the love of the natural places we like to visit. And I'll invite Joe here to join back in the discussion. And I guess we can take questions now.
Thank you so much, both of you. I'm going to make sure that we can see both of you. There we go. Both spotlighted. So thank you both so much. And I have a number of questions here. And first, I want to say congratulations on the Roger Tory Peterson. I put the little link to that in the chat. If anyone's interested in that, it'll be in the recording that we send out. So if anyone has any questions, please continue to put them into the chat. But I will start with, how did the two of you come to pair up on exhibitions?
Joe, you want to?
I'm sorry, what was that question again?
How did the two of you come to pair up on exhibitions?
Oh, well, we're both at the same gallery in Lambertville. It's called Artist Gallery on Bridge Street. It's an artist co-op where we do two-person shows throughout the year, featuring two artists at a time. And B and I have just agreed to show together 3 or 4 times at least now, I think. We just think our work goes really well together. I think they sort of complement and contrast a little bit.
So total serendipity, that wasn't like, it was somehow you were put together, you just kind of did it on your own.
Yeah.
So what are some of your best suggestions for people interested in learning landscape painting?
Ooh, I mean, the most important thing is just to start doing it. It's the more you work at it, the better you get. I painted for a long time, entirely self-taught. When I was doing it, all I had basically was old library books as instruction. Nowadays, you can get so much good information on YouTube. I mean, there's so many really great artists that put really good videos out there. Some you buy, some are free. But really, it's just a matter of practicing and working at it. And for landscape painting, I think I've mentioned that, painting in plein air, which is just painting on location as opposed to photographs, I think that's extremely important. Right now, I work from photographs a lot, but having the experience of having painted a lot on location, I think really helps me when I'm working in the studio as well, because photographs no matter how good the camera is or how good the photographer is, photographs don't really capture everything. When you're out looking at something live, I mean, your eyes always adjusting for the light when you're looking at the bright spots, when you're looking in shadows. So with that experience of painting on location, when you're looking at a photograph later, you might be able to imagine what is actually missing in those photographs. So just get painting is really the best advice I could give.
That kind of falls into the next question. Do you paint your trees on site or do you photograph and work on them later?
The two large trees that I ended my presentation with, those were from photographs. Trees that are more, background information, like on the Stony Brook barn that's up on the screen right now, that was entirely on location. But for that really detailed one with the weird name Yggdrasil, that was such a complicated tree. I would not have had enough time to do that on location. So those were photographs.
And so the next question is for Joe. How do you capture the smoky appearance of some of your work? And for B, the crisp, bright colors are spectacular. So it's a kind of a two-part question.
The smoky appearance, I think I know which paintings you're referring to. It's I've been really sort of going towards tonalism now as a style that I'm really fascinated with. It's really hard to describe, especially when put on the spot like this. But a lot of the paintings now I'm really building up layer by layer. Like the one that's still up on the screen was painted on location. That's more of an alla prima thing where you just paint so directly. I mean, every stroke you put down is almost what the finished product is. Now I tend to work in layers where I build things up, where there's scumbling and translucent glazes that I'll put over top of lower layers, and that helps build up a more atmospheric appearance to the pieces. I think that's the best answer I could give for that.
Okay, thank you. And for B, the crisp, bright colors are spectacular. So that's not that easy with watercolor. Sometimes people have the problem with getting muddy. And so do you want to share some of your technique?
Most of that is don't overmix my paint too much. I think that keeps the colors crisper. And as far as the detail, that's just a very fine brush. The more you go over something on watercolor, the muddier it's going to get. There's some ways of saving it, but the more you pre-plan, I guess that's the best answer. The more you pre-plan what you're going to do, the better off you are as far as keeping that fresh quality.
What size is a very fine brush?
I use a 0. I used to use 000, but my eyesights are gone. I guess I'm starting to use a 0 now, moving up in the world.
Okay, thank you. And this is for both of you as well. So whoever wants to go first, how many hours per week do you observe/paint?
I'll start. It depends really. I'm observing 100% of the time I'm outside. I can pretty much say that. Even if I'm driving, I'll see something, I'll pull over. I don't always have a camera, but I'm fortunate enough to be able to sketch an idea out and finish it later if I need to. And as far as painting, I like to put in about 4 hours a day, if unless the world's coming to an end with laundry or cars or all the standard and doing taxes and all the other fun stuff that goes along with being your own boss.
Thank you. And Joe, how about you? How many hours per week do you observe/paint?
Well, it's a tough question to answer, right? I guess like Bea said, really always observing. It's I tend to always have my camera with me, and out hiking or biking, whatever. If something catches my eye, I really stop and look at it, pay attention to it, take reference photographs. So it's hard to put any sort of hours on that, just other than all the time. For painting, I tend to go in spurts lately. Sometimes I'll just be painting frantically for a month straight. Sometimes I might go weeks without painting a thing. So it's hard to say how many hours. It's just whatever feels right at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And do you ever do commission work? This is for both of you. For example, for Joe, someone's land or home, and for Beatrice, someone's yard or animals. So whoever wants to go first. I think Joe, you should go first this time.
All right, I've done a couple of commissions. I think only 2 of houses. So yes. If I find the subject interesting in itself, I mean, if I feel it's something that I could do a good job with, if it's something that I would like to paint on my own, I mean, if my heart's not into it, I probably wouldn't feel that I could do a good job.
And if it's not too far from your house, right?
Yeah, that always helps.
And Beatrice, how about you? Someone's yard or animals or someone?
I've done pet portraits, mostly dogs. I take a few on a year. I try not to, I try to, paint what I paint, and then I'll take like 4, maybe 6 commissions a year. And once that's full, unless it's some special request or something I really want to do, that's all I do.
I'm looking to see, those were the only questions we're done with all the questions we have here in the chat, but do you have any parting words for us that you'd like to share, either one of you?
Basically, we just thank you for having us here. We hope everybody found the presentation informative and maybe fun. And to see more of our work, just to check out our websites. And if you're in Lambertville, stop by Artist Gallery. There's always a chance we might actually be there in person.
Okay, so it's Artist Gallery in Lambertville. I'm going to put that into the chat.
Correct.
And yeah, thank you all. And I hope you all will also come to see our exhibition in Nature's Realm, the art of Gerard Rutgers Hardenberg at Morven. Take another perspective that what New Jersey looked like at the turn of the 20th century, the landscapes and the animals, a lot of changes, and it was just at the verge of industrialization, and now here we are in the industrial world, but yet Joe and Beatrice bring us the calm and the beauty that's still around us. So thank you both so much for this wonderful evening. And we have a note here, Beatrice, I have fall flurries in my home and it gives me joy every time I see it. So one
Wonderful.
of your collectors. So
Oh, wonderful. Thank you
both so very much. And I will have a recording to everyone, Zoom recording sent to everyone who was on here tonight. And it'll also be up on our YouTube channel. So thank you all again and have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.